Okay, if you remember hard rock and heavy metal in the 1980s, you are going to really enjoy what I have for you here today. I found this article from the Vancouver Sun, June 16th, 1983. And if you're looking on your screen, you can see it. This is in the entertainment section. And it's basically an article about heavy metal. And it's really interesting what they do. They go in and kind of describe what they think heavy metal is. Remember, this is 1983. This is what they were saying then. And they go through this whole kind of description of heavy metal. And then they get towards the end of the article and they're actually talking to Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden. And they get his input on some stuff. So it's really kind of interesting. So I'm going to jump into this. I think you'll enjoy this, especially if you remember that period of time. Now, if you look at the pictures that they put here, they have three different images that are, I guess the idea is here that these represent heavy metal. And of course, you see Dio, Holy Diver there in the top right. You see Molly Hatchet, Take No Prisoners, which is such a strange thing to put on here to represent this. And then they have, because Molly Hatchet, of course, if you remember, it was more of a Southern rock kind of band. I mean, they were a little heavier as far as Southern rock goes, but they were more, again, kind of like Southern rock. And then they have Number of the Beast right there, which is, of course, like the quintessential bad 80s metal. When I say bad, I don't mean it was bad, because it happened to be one of the greatest heavy metal albums ever made, but it was supposed to represent all of this kind of strange, awful thing that heavy metal was back then. Actually, that Holy Diver, that was such a crazy album cover. Matter of fact, since we're talking about it, I'm going to pause this for a second just so I can have it here so we can look at it real quick. Okay, here's Dio's Holy Diver. And I don't know, I remember the first time I saw that in a record store, because everybody knew that Ronnie James Dio was going to be having this solo album. I know the band was called Dio, but we were all kind of thinking it that way as a solo album. And everybody knew it was coming out. And then I remember going to the record store. I remember the first time I saw that and I went, whoa, what is this? Anyway, and it ended up being really maybe one of the most important heavy metal records out of that entire era. So anyway, I want to jump into this article because I think, again, you're going to really enjoy this if you lived through this period of time back in the 80s and listened to hard rock and heavy metal. Okay, so parents hate it. Music critics treat it with disdain. Lovers of melodic music call it trash. It's heavy metal. Head-banging, hard-rocking, blood and guts rock and roll with thunderous guitar riffs and sinister overtones. Teenage heavy metal fans think it's devilishly good fun. In recent years, however, parents and leaders of the moral majority have become outraged by the form's use of satanic imagery and doomsday lyrics. It all began a decade ago with the acid rock of Led Zeppelin, welded to the darkly shaded lyrics of the original Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath. Now it's called heavy metal, one of the most popular forms of rock music today. For those uninitiated in the rites of heavy metal worship, there are several telltale signs. And this is so interesting because this is where they get into kind of the stereotype of what heavy metal is all about. Okay. The first is the band members' medieval macho attire, chains, studs, and leather jackets. And that really, in the early 80s, that was kind of a thing. And it was probably really kind of brought into vogue with Judas Priest. I don't know that anybody was really doing it quite the way they were prior to that. You know, and they had all the black leather and the studs and the chains and all the other stuff. And then that kind of, the other bands kind of picked up on that, but that did kind of become at least in the early 80s, and blue jeans and jean jackets. I remember how many kids at my school had a jean jacket with somebody's logo emblazoned on the back, Ozzy, Dio, Iron Maiden, something like that. So those were all the telltale signs of heavy metal. Okay, then there are the song titles: Die With Your Boots On, Hellion, Devil's Child, Sell Your Soul, Bloody Reunion, and Children of the Damned. And of course, Die With Your Boots On, that's Iron Maiden. The Hellion is a Judas Priest song. Devil's Child is also a Judas Priest song. Both of those are on Screaming for Vengeance. Sell Your Soul, what they're probably talking about here is the song on Uriah Heep's album, Abominog, which is a really cool album if you've never heard it or seen it. One of the creepiest album covers ever. Bloody Reunion, that's actually on this Molly Hatchet album that they have here. And then Children of the Damned, Iron Maiden. Okay. But the easiest way to spot a heavy metal act is by its album cover, which invariably depicts blood-dripping ghouls, dragons, or horned fiends. And that's probably why they picked this particularly Molly Hatchet album. You can't see it really clearly, but it's kind of a lizard dragon looking thing that they're on top of there. And then of course, the horned fiends, when you look at Dio's album there, this is, by the way, this character has a name, kind of like Iron Maiden has one. This guy's name is Murray. And then a horned fiend, I guess, on the Iron Maiden one would be the devil right there with horns. So that's got to be... Anyway, that's the horned fiends they're talking about. Okay. The members of a British band named Iron Maiden are the latest princes of darkness to propagate heavy metal mythology. The band headlines a heavy metal triple bill June 29th at the Coliseum. Iron Maiden plays an iron-fisted brand of rock turned up to mega volume in concert. Not sure how many decibels mega volume is, but it's got to be pretty high. True to form, the band's mascot is a ghoulish beast named Eddie, and that's Eddie right there. The band's first album... Okay, now, immediately fact check. And as soon as I read this, a bunch of you are going to start... typing in the notes because you're going to notice something immediately when I read this next paragraph. The band's first album cover depicts Eddie wielding a silver axe, dripping with blood, standing over a person clutching at Eddie's shirt. Eddie looks delighted. Okay, the fact check there, of course, and all Iron Maiden fans would have picked up on this immediately, is that what they're talking about, the album cover they're talking about, is the album Killers, Iron Maiden album, of course, but it's not their first album. It's actually their second album. So then they get the rest of these numbers wrong because of it. On the band's second album, The Number of the Beast, which is the one that we're showing here, which is actually their third studio album, Eddie is shown as the puppet master who controls the devil, who in turn is making people dance in the flames of hell. On the band's latest album, Peace of Mind, which came after this one, Eddie is chained and straitjacketed in a padded cell. He's been lobotomized, the blood trickling down from where his head has been chopped open and bolted shut again. As a matter of fact, I'm going to pause this video one more time so we can see that one in full color since we're on the topic. Okay, I'm back. There you go. There's Iron Maiden, Peace of Mind, and there's Eddie as they described, who's been lobotomized. There you go. With, as it says there, he's been lobotomized, blood trickling down from where his head has been chopped open and bolted shut again. And on the LP's inner sleeve, the band members sit prepared to dine on Eddie's brain, served on a silver platter. And anyway, there you go. They're getting this right. There you go. Fact check true. Okay, and on the... Okay, I already read that. And then it goes, sound like fun? The lead singer of Iron Maiden, Bruce Dickinson, thinks so. Quote, it's all intended as a tongue-in-cheek joke, he says, calling from Los Angeles. Eddie is a comic strip kind of character. I think he's about as harmful as a Batman comic or Conan the Barbarian, unquote. Dickinson admits the band has met opposition from concerned parents and religious leaders. Quote, there seems to be quite a few eccentric nutcases around, he says, but I don't know how anyone can take it so seriously. About the violent nature of Iron Maiden's latest cover, Dickinson laughed and said, quote, we'll probably get complaints from medical people next. Maybe we should put a warning on the album saying chopping off heads and eating brains may be dangerous to a person's health. Dickinson, however, doesn't think Eddie's sinister connotations will lead Iron Maiden fans to violence or devil worship. Quote, that's a load of rubbish. I'm a perfectly normal English guy who plays in a rock and roll band. I don't do drugs and I don't drink to excess, at least not too often, unquote. He says the whole chains and studs trend is derived from science fiction and an interest in such medieval-styled tales as J.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and Conan the Barbarian. And it's so interesting looking back at all this stuff because the imagery, as they talk about in there, you would never, if this was in a movie, in some sort of horror flick, you wouldn't bat an eye. No one would say anything about it other than, hey, wasn't that a freaky movie? Yeah, that's all the pushback you'd ever get is people saying, I don't know if I want to see that. That might be too scary. But you put that kind of imagery on an album cover and suddenly it's this whole other thing. And it's interesting in those two different art forms how people reacted in one way so negatively and people coming out in arms against all this stuff. But if it was a horror movie, somehow it was just enjoyed. And anyway, it's interesting to see how we reacted to these things. That's kind of what he's talking about there. So, okay, why did the band change a biblical quote? Pain was made to read brain on the new album. Dickinson said Iron Maiden did it for fun. And so if you remember on the back of this thing here, there's this quote right here from Revelation. And it says, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more brain, for the former things are passed away. And I mean, obviously, again, it's a tongue-in-cheek thing related to this album, which is just, it's kind of just a little silly thing. And as he said there, they did this obviously for fun. We try to maintain a sense of humor. That's what it's all about, really. Part of what it's about is Iron Maiden Holdings Limited, the band's parent company, which reaps the profits from the fans who have so far bought 4.5 million copies of the 3 Iron Maiden albums, which is, again, as we said a minute ago, that's not exactly correct. At this point, there are actually 4 studio albums. And what does a band call those fans on the back cover of its latest album? Earth dogs, rivet heads, headbangers, hell rats. They're terms of endearment, says Dickinson. And they almost got it right, although it is on the back, written on the back of Number of the Beast. It's not on the back of this one. And it says, to all headbangers, earth dogs, hell rats, and rivet heads everywhere, thanks and see you on the World Peace Tour 83. Anyway, that's what they're talking about right there. And they actually have the same thing written right there. This album is dedicated to headbangers, earth dogs, rivet heads, hell rats, and metal maniacs everywhere. See you on tour. Anyway, there you go. So anyway, I thought you'd find that kind of interesting looking back at what people were saying about this because in 1983, heavy metal was kind of a new art form. It was still, at least in this way, because so many things back in the 70s, like it referenced there, going all the way back to Black Sabbath and then Led Zeppelin and so many others just kind of got thrown in that idea of heavy metal. But then once we got into the 80s, you started seeing everything getting splintered off into different kind of categories. And so this right here, having this type of imagery and this was kind of a new thing in some ways. And so it did raise a lot of flags for people. But then, as I said a minute ago, it's so interesting that something like that would raise flags on the cover of an album. But if it was part of something else like a movie, you really wouldn't necessarily think anything of it. Anyway, kind of interesting stuff. Hope you enjoyed that. If you're not already following the channel, please follow the channel. And if you're into this stuff, you probably know some other people that are interested in this stuff too. Please copy the URL, paste it on your Facebook page, put it on your Twitter, X, or email it to people, message it to people, whatever, and that helps the channel grow, which we really appreciate. Anyway, with that, have yourself a fantastic day.